Heyday Frary here. Building landforms Part 1 is about building the scenic base on your model railroad. There have been many methods and materials to do this, but today I'm going to show you how to use cardboard strips and cover them with plastic cloth. The strips are quick to install and easy to change if you make a mistake or at some point in time you want to change your scenery. They should be about 1 inch wide and can be cut from an old cardboard box with a knife and a straight edge. They can be cut on a paper cutter, or you can cut a box up with a bandsaw. You can also buy them pre-cut and packaged. These are from Micromark. A big package like this will do all of the scenery you're going to see here today. You'll need scissors, a clamp-type stapler, and a hot glue gun. Okay, here's the area where I'm going to build a mountain using cardboard strips. The base here is 2-inch pink styrofoam. I've laid down cork roadbed so that the track is on about a 1/4 inch rise of the cork. And I like the cork combination with the pink styrofoam because the pink styrofoam can act like a drum, especially if you have the track mounted directly on it. The cork acts as an insulator, and I like that feature. Now right here I'm going to put in a tunnel portal in the mountain, and I have to do the tunnel portal first because once the mountain's in, I won't be able to get in here behind it and ballast the track and add the interior walls to the tunnel. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start building the cardboard web in this area. I'm going to put the tunnel portal in, and you can watch me as I do it, and I'll explain what I'm doing. What I've done to prepare the tunnel portal is I've glued, with the hot glue gun, I've glued some wings on the back. And the reason I put the wings on the back is to add an area that I can attach the cardboard strips to. I want the portal to be the same height as the ground level. So what I did, I put in pieces of cork roadbed to bring the portal up to the same height as the bottom of the ties. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a little hot glue on the bottom of the portal to stick it in place, and then we're going to use the track gauge to make sure that it's centered properly. And if I put the track gauge in here, I can move the tunnel back and forth to get it just right. Okay, now that I'm sure that the portal is centered, I'm going to use a square just to set it in place and hold it until the glue sets so that the tunnel will be perpendicular to the flat ground area. Cardboard strips are very easy to use, they're inexpensive, and they make a landform that you can change if you're not satisfied with it at a later date. Here you can see the cardboard strips have been covered with plastic cloth. Now you can use other material. I like the plastic cloth because it's easy to use and it doesn't leave any mess behind. Now I'm going to start with the cardboard strips, and I'm just going to take and make a little bend on the bottom of the strip. As you can see, just a little hook on the bottom. I'm going to put a dab of hot glue on it, and I'm going to stick it in place. I've drawn this line to be the outline of my mountain, and I'm going to try and put the cardboard strips along the line. Now don't worry at this point about the length of the strips because they're going to be cut and there's going to be cross pieces put in. So we're going to continue along, and if for some reason you're worried about the hot glue holding, you can also use a clamp type stapler or a regular staple gun, staple this in. In fact, you could do this in lieu of using hot glue. I like them about 4 or 5 inches apart. And I find that they seem to work best. We move our square out of the way, and now we're going to start by attaching a strip to this wing that we've installed, and we're going to bring it out across the front here. One of the things that I found I like to do with these strips is I like to run them through my fingers like this to get them a little softer and more pliable. So we take our glue and we put a little glue right here. Now you can hold this and risk burning your fingers, or you can use a clamp type staple gun. Here's a clamp type gun. This one here I bought at Staples, which is a stationery store, stationery chain. And you can come in here and use a clamp type stapler. Now for these cross pieces, all we really need is the clamp type stapler, because we're going to bring these up. And the shape at this point is something you shouldn't agonize over. You get it pretty much the way you want it, and then later on you can change it if you don't want it, if you don't like it. And the changes don't have to be drastic. They can be minor, or you can take the whole mountain out just by running a knife along the bottom and lifting it out. So I'm going to go along here and I'm going to continue to add cardboard strips, and I'm going to continue to build my mountain. What I'm going to do along the back edge is I'm going to put in a profile strip that all of these strips will attach to, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that. This is just a simple grid. It doesn't really need a lot of support at this point. What I'll do later on when I put the plaster cloth on it is I'll put a support right in this area just to hold the back up. And I'll just hot glue it in. In fact, why don't I do it now? I'll get a piece, make a little foot on it, hot glue it. Okay, then bring it up here to the height we want this and just clamp it off. Now remember, whatever's going on inside the mountain, you're not going to see, because the top here is all going to be covered. It's going to be covered with plaster cloth, and once the plaster cloth is in place, well, it's going to give it a strength that's much like an eggshell. So now we got a piece coming across. Before we go too far, I'm going to finish inside the tunnel portal, and I'm going to ballast this track that you can see in here. Okay, here we are looking inside the tunnel portal. I've taken out the stiffener just for temporarily so that you can see what I'm doing. What I've got here is I took another piece of cork road bed and put it in here, and I put it in here just so that I could raise this retaining wall, which is made out of plaster, up to the same level as the track, so that when you look in to the tunnel portal, you're going to see this wall primarily. Above the wall, I'm just going to put cardboard, and I'm going to paint it black, and I'm going to put a piece of cardboard here and also paint it black. So that will be the mask that will keep you or anyone from seeing inside the tunnel portal and seeing into this area. I'm not going to worry about this side, because the only way you could see in here would be if you were up on the railroad in the back near the backdrop. So I'm just going to leave it. Here's a piece I made to go inside the tunnel. As you can see, all it is some corrugated cardboard. I glued the plaster wall to it and sprayed everything black. Then I glued on a piece of brick paper, and then I took the spray can again and I just kind of feathered it out to black at the end, because you won't be able to see it. I want to keep your eye focused in this area when you look just inside the tunnel. Then I took some earth-colored paints and I just dry brushed this and added some greenery. This is going to be hot glued inside the tunnel portal, and I'm going to do that now. All right, here's my piece. Here's my hot glue gun. So I'm just going to take and Put some hot glue along the bottom of this. You don't have to be too careful because you can come back later and re-glue it if you need to, especially from the back. So now I've got it, the glue on it. I'm going to slide it up inside the tunnel portal so that it's flush with the back. And once it's in place, I'm going to check everything with the track gauge to make sure, I don't know how well you can see this, but we're checking with the track gauge to make sure there's plenty of clearance, and there is. So there's our tunnel block. I'm going to put a little more hot glue right up here to hold everything together. It'll hold the tunnel portal upright, and it'll hold this piece in place. So there we are. Now all we're going to do is take and paint in here black, add some stones and rocks, and finish this area. Then I'm going to ballast the track. Now I've added some white glue and some rocks, and I've ballasted the track. I'm going to bring the camera around. We're going to look in the tunnel portal, and I'll show you how it looks. Here's what the inside of the tunnel portal looks like. When it comes time to finish the scenery, I'll put a little bit of greenery just inside the mouth of the tunnel. So here's our little mountain. I've been building it while I've been waiting for the glue to dry. So what I've done, I've put up a profile board along the back. I've added some vertical strips. I still have got to put in the horizontal strips, but we still have to tie this together, and I'm going to use these strips to determine how high this profile is going to be. I should mention in passing that the Micromark cardboard strips come in one big piece that's been die cut, and to get them out of the packaging, all you have to do is just tear them out, and they come right out like so. And you don't have to be fussy with these because you're going to crunch them up anyway when you build scenery with them. So we're going to break up a few, and I'm going to put in the horizontal elements of the scenery right now. And I'm going to do it just as I did this area, which means just starting here and just going across. Now, one school of thought says that it's always best to put in a toe strip. Some people do that. I don't. It just depends on how you like to do it. So here we go. And you notice you determine the contour. Oops, here's one that pulled out. Makes no difference. Because it's going to be covered with plaster cloth, and the plaster cloth is going to provide the strength. So you're starting to see this mountain shape up here. That looks pretty good so far. We've got a big spot here, and I'm not really worried about it, but if you are, I'll show you how to fix it. You just take another piece of cardboard and just lay it across here, and then just tuck the ends underneath. Okay? So our next step, now that the grid is pretty much done for this part of the mountain, is to apply our plaster cloth and let it dry. We're going to use plaster wrap to cover the cardboard strips. I'm using plaster wrap made by Scenic Express. I favor this product over other ones that are offered because it seems to have more plaster on the gauze and it gives you a stronger scenery. What I've done here to support the mountain, you saw me put a cardboard leg in earlier. I took the leg out when I finished inside the tunnel portal. Another way to support the mountain is to just pack it with paper. Some people leave the paper in place after the plaster cloth is on. Some people pull it out. Depends on what you like. I like to have the mountain be hollow. So after I've covered this section with plaster cloth, I'm going to pull the paper out. Well, you might say, what happens over here? How do you get paper in here? Well, in this case, if I was going to have paper in this area, I would have only built the cardboard frame to here. I would have packed it with paper, covered it with plaster cloth, allowed the plaster cloth to set, pulled the paper out, and then added more cardboard strips and kept going. I would have done it that way. So let's start with the plaster wrap. What I've done, I've cut it into pieces about 5 inches, just using a pair of scissors. And you activate the plaster by dipping the pieces in water. I'm going to fill this container with water. I'm going to dip the pieces in and lay them on the cardboard web. Before we start, I should mention the blue tape. This is regular blue painter's tape, and I've put it on the track and around the painted portion of the tunnel portal here to protect it from the plaster wrap. I'm going to bring the plaster wrap right up to the edge of the tape, and then when we're all done, everything's painted, I'll pull the tape off. We're going to start by taking a piece of plaster wrap, dipping it in the water, and laying it in place. We'll start right at this end. I like to overlap the plaster wrap a little bit, and as it starts to set, I'll smooth out some of the seams. Now you can go right along with this as fast as you can move. Just keep laying the stuff on. Eventually we're going to make 2 layers of this, so if there are any little cracks or places you miss, you can fix them later. You notice I've taken the edge and I've folded it under. I want to get one right next to the tunnel portal here, and you see what I've done. I've pushed it right up against the edge of the blue tape, and I'm just going to come in here with my finger, and I'm just going to smooth that out. Now when this starts to set, I'll fix that with another piece that's close by. Now I'm going to do the same on the top of the portal. You see, this is the reason for the blue tape. I'm bringing this piece right up to the edge, like so. You can see just how quick this goes. There's not a lot to this. The reason I've spaced the cardboard strips 4 or 5 inches apart is it matches the width that I've cut these pieces of plaster cloth. And that's something that you'll determine, the more of this you do, you'll determine what the right spacing is for everything to get the most coverage out of the plaster wrap. You get about 10 square feet of coverage out of each roll of this plaster wrap. And so I'm going to cut up the whole roll. This will save time, and if I don't use it, I'll just put it back in the plastic bag that the roll came out of and save it for later use. Here we go. One last piece here to cut. water. Now you notice I've started building this mountain from the bottom up, and I like to do it that way. It doesn't make really any difference how you do it, as long as you get good coverage on everything. Okay, we're moving right along here now. This goes pretty quick. We're almost at the end of our mountain here. I'm gonna leave a little of the cardboard showing here so I can add on to the mountain a little later. So that's about it. There are a couple of places here where I'm going to add another layer, and I'm going to go along and find those spots now. And if they look real thin, sometimes the plaster falls off the cloth, and I don't know what causes that, but it happens. And you can see this is starting to set up here already. So we're going to go away. We're going to leave this now. We're going to let the plaster set, and then when we come back, I'll show you how to finish it. Before we leave the topic of plaster wrap, I'd like to show you one additional way to use it, and that's applying it dry. Now, I learned about this at a model railroad club I visited, and what they were doing, they were building a mountain in the distance, and they found this to be the easiest way with a guy on a ladder to put the plaster cloth in place. You only need one hand to do it. Here's what you do. You take the plaster cloth dry and you just lay it in place. And I'm going to continue to do this. Just lay your pieces in. And as you can see, I'm only using one hand, so that if I was on a ladder or a step ladder, I would have balance and I'd be safe doing it without falling off. So I've laid on the pieces dry, and now I'm going to take a spray bottle containing water. This is just regular water, and I'm going to soak with one hand again now. I'm going to soak the plaster wrap down until it's saturated. This is also not as messy. There's really no mess with plaster wrap, but this is another way to do it that you won't have any drips. Now, after you put the water down, after everything's wet, you can go in with your fingers and kind of push things into place if they don't look like they've snuggled down enough. And that's it. Another way to use plaster wrap. Hey, Dave Frary here. Welcome to Building Landforms Part 2. In this video, I'll show you how to build landforms using pink or blue styrofoam sheets and pieces. So let's get started. Styrofoam landforms are easy to build and change, and foam scenery will stand up to a lot of rough handling, so it's perfect for modular layouts or a layout that's going to be moved. It's lightweight, dimensionally stable, and almost indestructible. Styrofoam is easy to carve and shape and accepts all kinds of scenery techniques, especially my water-soluble method of building model railroad scenery. The only downside to styrofoam scenery is that it's more expensive than cardboard strip and plaster shell techniques. Today I'll be using 1-inch thick and 2-inch thick sheets of pink or blue styrofoam. The sheet sizes can range from 2 feet by 8 feet to 4 by 8 sheets, and it's sold in thicknesses from a 1/2 inch thick to 2 inches thick, depending upon how cold it gets where you live. The foam can be pink or blue depending on who makes it. Doesn't make a difference. You don't need many tools to work with styrofoam. Here's a few of the tools that I use. This is about all I use, really. The first is this 4-inch blade serrated knife. I use this for everything. This is available in fishing supply stores, in kitchen supply stores, and any place where knives are sold. This has a 4-inch blade and it has a serrated edge. One knife like this, which costs $3 or $4, will last the whole life of your scenery project. A second kind of knife I use a lot is this one made by Stanley. I guess this is called a box cutter or a retractable bladed knife, but I like it because it has a lot of blades and they're in here and they're self-loading, and I can ratchet it out to the full 2 inches. I can cut through a whole 2-inch thick sheet of styrofoam, and when the tip gets dull, I can break this off and I have a fresh new sharp tip waiting for me. These knives are available in plastic or metal and all price ranges, so just check out your hardware store. You'll also need some kind of a square or straight edge. Here's one type. I like this because it has the 90 degrees and I can cut a square corner with it. You can also use a carpenter's square or just a plain old ruler if you need to. Anything you can rest your knife against to get a straight edge. Also, for larger jobs, hacksaw comes in handy. Here's one. This will cut through a large sheet of foam with no effort at all. Sometimes you can't get this top part of the frame through the cut that you've made if you've got a big piece. So you take the blade out, wrap a little tape around the end, make a handle, and you can cut right through the piece with just using the blade. I also use hot wire tools for forming foam. This is a tippy tool, and it's good for getting into small places and making cuts you can't make with other kinds of tools. There's also the hot wire foam factory. This has all of the tips and all of the materials you need to cut through foam. This has a plug-in transformer that goes with it that works very well for most of your scenery projects. I'm also going to talk a little bit about what you need to hold your foam pieces together. What do I use to glue them together? I use liquid nails. This is styrofoam compatible liquid nails for projects. This is the stuff you want to use. Don't use white glue or any other kinds of caulking or anything like that. This stuff holds the foam together. It's tacky enough so you can stick two pieces together and they'll stay in place until this stuff sets. So this is liquid nails for projects. Another adhesive that you might want to try, I found out about this when I was in Europe, and the closest I could come in this country is a product called Beacon's 3-in-1 Advanced Craft Glue. And I bought this at a craft store. And you use this like contact cement. You put some on 2 pieces of foam, you kind of push them together to smear the glue around, pull it apart several times, and then clamp it together. And once you clamp it together, it's there for the duration. And I'll show you how to do that as we go. When building a mountain with styrofoam, you take 2 different approaches. This I like to call the wedding cake approach. The wedding cake is because I'm going to stack layers of styrofoam to make a large boxy pile, and then I'm going to whittle or carve it or shape it so that it looks like a hill. Let's keep going here. Let's put on another piece. You can see these are just foam scraps that I'm using. Put on another one. I'll orient this one kind of like this. And let's put one on the front. All right, we still got a little piece here. Let's All I'm doing is looking for volume here. Here's a piece that's going to go in front. That would make a nice front on this. I want to cut it right about here. So I'm going to use my serrated knife. I'm just going to scribe it, break it, and put it in place. This is not rocket science. This is scenery building, and it's just about the simplest form of scenery building you can do. Now, if you have a doubt, any doubts, about whether this stuff is going to hold, you can also, this is one of our scraps, you can also take some nails, if you're worried about this stuff staying in place. Take some nails and let me put in a couple more pieces here. There's some pieces. Now, if you're in doubt about them staying in place, I've got some long nails here, and you can just run a nail down into a piece just to hold them all together till the liquid nail sets. The setting time depends on your conditions where you live, and it could be from anywhere from 2 hours to a day. When you're all done with your liquid nails for the day, the way to save it, to keep it moist out here at the end without it drying out, you don't want to be sticking a nail in it. You want to take a plastic bag and slide the end of the caulking tube into the bag, like so. Take an elastic band and just run it around the end. See that? What I've done, I've encapsulated the end in plastic. I've created an air barrier with the elastic, and this is going to be good to use another day. Okay, here's our little mountain. Of course, this is just a display. If you were doing this on a model railroad, you'd have a great big area. I'm going to start by pulling out the nails. They've done their job, and as you can see, our mountain is pretty good. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to hook up a hot knife, and we're going to start cutting away to shape this into a small hill. One of the original hot wire cutting tools was made by the Hot Wire Foam Factory. It's a company from California, and they make foam cutting instruments. This is one of them, and this is probably the best one for model railroaders to use. They make several others that are wands. Some look like an ice pick, where you can go in and carve out small rocks and things in the surface of the foam. But you have to remember, in all of the demonstrations that they show this cutter being used with beadboard, which it cuts very, very well. It doesn't cut pink or blue styrofoam as well as I'd like. You have to get it very, very hot, and you really have to take your time, or you'll collapse the yoke here, or you'll break the blade. Let me show you what I mean. This is good now for small jobs, and I'll show you how to do it. We're going to turn it on, and I'm going to bring the heat up to maximum. All right, now I don't know if you can see it on camera, but the wire blade here is starting to smoke. All right, we're going to just take and just cut away. I really should be doing this in a well-ventilated area. The last thing I want to do is breathe the smoke from the foam. But I'd suggest that you do this with the window open and a fan on, and perhaps even an organic respirator. Okay, you can see our little hill here is starting to take shape. I'm going to keep cutting and get it in shape, and then I want to show you another hot wire cutting tool that you may like as well as this hot wire tool. The second tool I want to show you is the tippy tool, and it comes with a small blade curved like this, and this is good for carving rocks. There's also an attachment for this tippy tool that I'm going to put on here, and I'm going to show you how it does big cutting jobs also. Here's the tippy tool with a aftermarket yoke put on it to make it into a cutter similar to the hot wire foam factory. And the advantage of the tippy tool is it has an on and off switch right on the handle. You turn it on by holding the switch down. It heats up this piece of wire right here, which is substantially thicker than the wire on the hot wire foam tool, and it gets real hot. I just found that out. So you hold down this and you make a nice smokeless cut. I'm working a bit slower because it's going through the pink foam, and I think all of these tools were probably made for something softer, like styrene foam, which they use to carve statues in the movies, or the beadboard foam. Okay, I've cut away about as much as I wanted with the tippy tool. I'm going to put it aside for a minute. I'm going to take my trusty knife and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to smooth up some areas that I want to get a little more contour on. You know, one of the problems with any of these hot wire tools is you can't get right down close because the end of the tool here is in the way. So if you go to make a cut, you're always limited by the fact that the tool is going to block you. You can't bring it. It isn't like having a hacksaw blade in your hand where you can bring it right down and cut that edge off. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and carve this into a small hill, and then when we come back, I'll show you what I'm going to do with the foam. Here's our little mountain. It's been roughly shaped, and it's good enough because now I'm covering it with plastic cloth. And I showed you how to use plastic cloth in part 1 of this presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead, cover the foam with pieces of plastic cloth, and then when I'm done, we'll come back and add some rocks and we'll finish it. Notice how the plastic cloth kind of hides all of the really rough edges of the foam here. And we're going to further hide them in the next step after the plastic cloth sets. There, now all the edges are nicely sealed together. Now I'm going to go away and let this set. Another way to shape foam, to really get it nice and smooth, is to use a Sureform tool. This is a Stanley Sureform tool. You'll see on the bottom of it, it has a edge that's been pressed into it almost like a cheese grater, so that when you put it in the palm of your hand, and I believe that this is how you use it correctly, with the teeth facing forward, you come in and you actually rasp off the foam, and it makes a surface that's really smooth enough so that we can finish it with a light coating of Sculptamold, of drywall mud, or of gypsylite, and get a really nice looking smooth finish. Now there are people who will say, well, we can take the foam here and we can just paint it. You know, paint will be okay. We don't have to do any other process to it. Well, I'm here to tell you that if you put latex paint on this foam, you're going to use about 10 times as much paint as necessary, and it's going to take forever to dry because the water in the paint is going to soak into the foam and it's going to stay there for a long time because the top's going to skin over and dry, and it's going to leave a wet, spongy area underneath. So we have to seal the foam. There's no way to get around it. And I'm going to continue carving here. I do want to show you another kind of Surform tool. This is for smaller areas. This one has got a nice handle on it. It's easy to use, and you can get in and around things and get into tight areas with it. Again, it has the cheese grater bottom on it, which works very well with foam. I do want to show you this Surform tool. This one's been around since the beginning. I bought this about 1980, and I still use it. It's still sharp. The only thing I use it on is foam, and it's still sharp enough to do a really good job on model railroad scenery. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish smoothing this out, and then I'll show you how we're going to finish it. Well, I put on my old shirt. This is the one I always wear when I work in plaster, gypsylite, or Sculptamold. I don't care if I get any on the shirt. It's got holes in it. It's old. But it's my scenery shirt, so I'm ready to go. Let's talk about the materials we're going to use to cover the plaster wrap. There are two products I use, and I use them more or less interchangeably. One is gypsylite. Gypsylite is a base coat plaster, and it was originally manufactured to use as the base coat under a finished plaster wall. It is a plaster product, and it has vermiculite in it, which gives it some texture. You mix it with water, it mixes cleanly. You have about a 30 to 45 minute working time with it. The other product I use all the time is Sculptamold. Sculptamold is a very, very forgiving product. It's a clay-based material that mixes with water. It has very good cleanup ability, and when it dries, it's lightweight, it's very flexible, it can be drilled, tapped, painted, and the best thing about these two products over all others is that they take paint the same way as foam rock castings or plaster rock castings do. So that when you use a plaster casting and then you surround it with Sculptamold or gypsylite and paint it, they both take paint exactly alike. Here's straight plaster cloth. In the foreground here, I'm just going to have grass. So I'm not going to seal the plaster cloth with any other product. I'm just going to paint it here. And here I'm using an earth-colored latex paint. This is flat indoor wall paint. What I did, I took a soil chip to the hardware store, and I had them match the color. I'm going to finish the back here with some rock castings, so I'm going to allow this to dry, and then when it comes time to put green foam on it and or grass, what I'm going to do is just brush on dilute white glue and sprinkle foam on. So our next step now is to mix up some gypsylite, and we'll put some rocks right along in here. The mixing formula for gypsylite is pretty simple. It's 2 parts gypsylite, which I've already pre-measured in this coffee cup, to 1 part of water, and the water is here. And this gives you a mix that is the right working consistency for scenery. It gets a little thicker as you let it set. So now that we've got it mixed, I'm going to show you how to apply it. And while we're applying it on the scenic base, I'm going to add a few rock castings. All right, I've mixed my gypsylite and water thoroughly together. The first thing I want to do is wet down the existing scenery. The plaster cloth has dried, and if I apply gypsylite over it, the dry plaster cloth will suck some of the water out of the gypsylite, so it won't set properly. So let's take a plant sprayer here with just plain water in it, and I'm going to wet the plaster wrap. And I'm going to start by just troweling on the gypsylite. You don't have to be fussy with this. You could do this with a brush if you prefer. Brush works just fine. And the thickness doesn't matter much, as long as you cover the plaster wrap with the gypsylite. In fact, you can pile it up in places. You can take the brush, you can add rock-like texture to it. And as you can see, it has a fairly gritty texture of its own. And this is why I prefer it, especially if you're modeling desert scenery or someplace where there's a lot of texture to the soil. This is a perfect way to do it. Let's put a rock mold in place. This is the rock mold that I've selected. It's just a piece of a foam rock. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put sculptor mold on the rear of the rock. You don't have to be fussy. If you've ever put down tile, you'll know that this is how the old-time tile guys did it. We're just going to push the rock casting up into place. Now I'm going to take a brush, a wet brush, just an old China bristle brush, and I'm going to push the gypsylite up and around the rock casting. Now, don't be alarmed if you get the gypsylite on the casting itself. Doesn't make any difference, because we can take a clean, wet brush and remove any unwanted gypsylite from anywhere on the casting. You don't have to be fussy with this stuff. In fact, some of the best scenic effects you'll get is when you're not too fussy with it. Okay, we got to add a little more. Then we'll put the rock in. Of course, the big advantage, and I've mentioned this before, is the working time. I am in no hurry to make sure that everything is in the right place here, because I've got 30 to 45 minutes to work with this, and I usually take all of that time. There's our little China bristle brush, and what I'm doing, I'm just wiping the excess from the surface of the casting. You can see that the plastic cloth is lifted up a little here. I don't care about that really, because I'm going to fix that when I add the scenery. Before we leave gypsylite, I want to show you how it looks all set. Here it is. It's dry, it's hard. In fact, it's hard as a rock. But it's still soft enough that you can carve it with a very sharp knife. But you should do your carving while it's wet with a wet brush. That's the best way. So here it is, and it's ready for paint. Before we leave the section on using plaster wrap, I'd like to demonstrate using Sculptamold. Sculptamold is the alternative to gypsylite for covering plaster wrap. This is Sculptamold. This is available from Scenic Express, just like the gypsylite was. Comes in a nice big tub. And for most model railroad projects, especially if you're building a module or something of that size, this tub will probably be enough. Building a large model railroad, you may want to buy it in a larger size. Nice thing about the tub, it keeps it fresh. It also comes with a complete set of instructions. So if you're hesitant about using this or you've never used it before, you should read the instructions before you start. The mixing of Sculptamold is really simple. It starts Sculptamold to 1 part water. That's a good start for you. If you want it thinner or thicker, then you add more Sculptamold or more water to the mix. So there it is there. I'm going to mix it together and I'm going to show you how to use it. It couldn't be simpler. This is my favorite modeling material. I use it everywhere for almost every situation. You can model rocks with it. You can use it just as a cover for plaster wrap. You can take a brush like this and you can put texture into the surface. And as it sets, just troweled on, it has a little bit of surface texture, which is something like cottage cheese. So if you like the texture of cottage cheese, you'll love Sculptamold. What I've done here, I've taken some rock castings. These are plastic castings, and I know they're hard to see because it's white on white here. Here are several different ones. These I made from my own rubber molds. You can get rubber molds. If you like plastic castings, you can get them from Joel Bragdon online, and I'll add that information at the end of this video. You can also use styrofoam rocks. I'm going to talk a little bit more about styrofoam rocks later in this DVD, but just be aware that you can use these interchangeably with plaster rocks. So let's start. You saw me put the blue tape. Well, the blue tape was for a reason. I'm going to add a little bit of Sculptamold right along beside this tunnel portal, and I'm going to plant my rock casting right into the Sculptamold base. Now, some people in certain situations like to add a little bit of white glue to the Sculptamold mix. What it does, it gives it some strength. Okay, there's a rock mold pushed right in place. You can see that some has oozed out. You just take a wet brush and you can push it around. And like gypsylite, if you get any on the surface of the rock casting, you can just take a wet brush and brush it away. It's very forgiving stuff. I'm going to install some of these plastic castings, and the thing you always want to remember when you put in plastic castings is you should wet them. Either take your casting and put it in a bucket of water, or take a spray bottle like I'm doing here and soak the back of it. What this does, it keeps the plaster from absorbing the moisture out of the Sculptamold, and messing with its setting qualities. So we take our rock and we just push it right in there. That's a nice mix, nice match. And we take our brush and we just smooth it in. What I don't want the rock mold to look like is that it's just stuck on top of the scenery, which in fact it is, but I don't want it to look that way. I want it to look like the soil is washed away and left the rock exposed. I always want to have some soil over the top of the rock, and a little bit over the top of the foam rock here. There. Now when this sets, this will be nice and hard. It'll take paint well, as you'll see, and we can move on. Now if you've read my scenery book, you know that when I paint rock castings, I like to use something I call scenery black. This is scenery black. It's 2 parts earth to 1 part flat black paint, and then it's diluted half after you mix it with water. So what you get is a gray mixture tending towards black that I use as a base coat for all my rock work. And you can see I'm not fussy with this at all. So I put on the scenery black like you see me doing here. I allow it to dry, and then I dry brush the rock color on top of it. And what it does, the scenery black, is it brings everything together. In other words, it makes everything one color. And by making everything one color, the dry brush process becomes very, very simple, and everything will blend together. There we go. Now you see with the scenery black on here, you can't tell the foam casting from the plastic castings. My next step is to take an earth colored paint. This is the earth that I use for most all my projects. You've seen it before. And I come in here and I blend the earth into the scenery black. I only want the scenery black really where there are rocks and around the rocks. Where there's just going to be grass or dirt, the earth color is adequate. It's fine for that. As you can see, this goes really fast. And I'm only going to do this area so that I can start and finish something while the tape is rolling and you can actually get to see me do it. After I get through taping, then I'm going to go back and finish the area. And that'll probably be in another part of building landforms. Here's our hill with the scenery black and the earth colored paint brushed on it. Now I'm going to go away a couple hours, allow this to dry, and then I'll be back and show you how to paint the rocks. Some people like to use a knife to carve rock faces in styrofoam. I'm not very good at it, so I don't do a lot of it. They also use these small hot wire tools to go in and actually use the tool to carve away pieces of the foam to make it look like a rock face. The best person I ever saw carving rocks in styrofoam is a man named Albert Rademacher. He lives in Munich, Germany. And here is how he does it. Albert uses a regular kitchen knife to carve 4-inch thick blocks of foam that have been glued together using a cement that's similar to airplane cement. He starts by roughing up the surface of the foam pieces. These large pieces and these blocks have been cut on a large hot wire tool, so he gets perfect alignment when he puts the pieces together at the end. What he's added with his knife are fault lines, and these fault lines somewhat follow the lines where the foam is glued together, but not necessarily. After he gets a pattern that he likes, he goes in with a piece of rough sandpaper and just knocks off the high edges. Then he goes back, as you can see here, and kind of finishes up some of the areas between the rock formations just to make them stand out, to make them more individual. Here Albert is assembling the pieces to see how the rocks look with the track piece in the foreground. All the pieces are held together, as I said before, with a product that is like a thin airplane cement, and he uses it like a contact adhesive. You see he's thought about this piece, and by cutting it all apart, he can get angles in the foam that you couldn't otherwise carve. And then at the end, of course, it's all reassembled. Here Albert's working under the bridge. Now he's going to take a pencil and he's going to carve stones into the surface of the bridge, and when he paints them, they're going to look just like stones that were stacked. All of the scrap pieces from the carving process are glued back in under the bridge to add gravel to the waterway that he's building here. Now Albert's going to assemble all of the pieces, and then he's going to take them to a spray booth and he paints them with graphic arts spray paint. This is a water-based paint that doesn't affect the foam at all. And here you can see his results. He's used browns, grays, and tans to get very natural looking rocks. I said I would mention a little bit about foam and plaster rock castings. And here's some of the things that I use. I really like latex rock molds, rubber rock molds. If I'm going to use a mold, and I'm going to fill it with plaster, then I like something that's big and durable like this one. A lot of people make these. This is made by Sterling. Joel Bragdon makes a whole line of molds if you like plaster casting. The other alternative is urethane molds. These are lightweight urethane castings. They paint up beautifully. They look just like real rock. And what I like to do with these is run them through a bandsaw or a handsaw and make them a little bit thinner. And as you saw before, you saw me putting in pieces of rocks that were made out of foam. This is the monster that I start with. I buy one of these. This is sold by Scenic Express. It's like an instant mountain. It's made out of foam. And what I do, I take a saw and I just cut it up into components. Now when you cut up the pieces, they're quite thick because the backing on this, as you can see, is an inch or more in thickness. So after I cut out the pieces I want, I run them through a bandsaw and reduce the thickness on the back of them. And ideally, I like pieces of rock castings that are about this thick, not very big. But they work wonderfully, and as you'll see, they paint up beautifully. I want to show you the paints I use for painting the rocks. I use only acrylics, and I use what is called school-grade acrylics. These aren't quite up to the high performance that professional artists need, but it's good enough for model railroad scenery. There are many brands available. These are all available in craft stores. So if you have an AC Moore or Michaels or Ben Franklin near where you live, check out the line of craft paints that they have. Portfolio is one brand, Sergeant Art is another. My old friend Golden, tube colors are okay. Utrecht Linen, these tend to be more expensive. This is more of an artist paint. But if it's all you can find, it's all you can find. And there are paints made by Winsor Newton. So you have a wide variety of manufacturers to choose from. Now the colors you need for painting rock. This is what I use. And I don't know how well you can see that. And if I tip it up anymore, my raw umber will run off the thing. We have white, we have black, raw sienna, raw umber. These four colors, along with a little red if I was modeling the desert, like a terracotta. These four colors are all you need to create almost any rock effect. We also need a brush, and we're going to call this dry brushing. And the reason we call it dry brushing is because the brush is perfectly dry. These are 49-cent China bristle brushes. This is all I use for scenery painting. So let's get started. I mix the colors directly on my little palette. And I'm going to start by taking on the brush some white and some black, and I'm going to mix it together to make a gray. All right, this is going to be first color. I'm going to put a little bit of raw umber into it just to get a shade that's a little lighter than these rocks. And we're going to start right over here, and we're just going to start by dry brushing on the rocks. Don't be too fussy. Just come in, and all I'm trying to do is add a little light to the tops of the rocks and get coverage. All right, there's our first color. And you can see again the reason for using the scenery black, because when we start dry brushing, we're not just dry brushing a rock. We're dry brushing the whole rock face. And by using Sculptamold and then covering it with scenery black, we've blended the whole rock face together. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the raw sienna, and I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of white and a little bit of the black, and we're going to start and we're going to try to add a color that's kind of like the earth color, and we're going to add it to the tops of the rocks here. Okay, now you might say to yourself, hey, he's just taken all of that white paint and he's covered it with an earth colored paint. Yep, I have. I've done that. It doesn't hurt to do it. So now I'm going to take a little black, a little white, a little bit of the raw umber and a little bit of the raw sienna, and mix them together, and let's see what color we got. So we'll go up here in an area that I know is going to be covered with grass, and we'll check it out. So as you can see, this is all about just daubing on the color. Now there's my rock, pretty much done. I'm going to add a little more gray to it, and I'm just taking in on the palette here, I'm mixing up a little white and a little black. You can see the color here. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to start the dry brushing action, which again, I'm just hitting the top surfaces of things just to make them stand out a little. This is a very forgiving system. Once you get used to it, you can create almost any color rock with these 4 colors. And you mix them on the palette and you kind of smush them together until you get something that looks good to you. And once it looks good to you, I mean, you're the one that is building the scenery and you're the one that has to be pleased. And once you please yourself, you know you got it made. All right, we've brought them up. And sometimes if the shadows look a little bit stark, in other words, they look too dark, you can go in there with the tip of the brush and just push some paint in. So, now I'm going to take a little bit of the raw sienna, which is the earth colored paint, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to just add a line through here where there was a different layer of sediment, a little bit here. Can you see that on camera? I hope so. Come in and add another line here. Maybe add a little straight raw sienna down below. A little raw umber in the shadows. There. Now the next step is to go away and allow this all to dry a little bit. Here's the rock piece I did with gypsylite, and these are foam castings put in here. And you see I've painted everything with the scenery black, and I've put on some earth paint. Now it's time to come in with our 4 colors, black, white, raw sienna, raw umber, and start painting these rocks. And as we did before, I'm going to start by mixing some black together with some white, making a gray just to brighten up these rock castings a little bit. And gray is a good base color for rocks. If you go out in nature and look at rocks, some rocks are almost white. Some parts of the country, the rocks are green or bluish. So you start with a gray, and then you can bring the color up or down from there and make it look like anything you want. All right, we've got a little bit of black and white on here. Now we're going to take a little bit of the raw sienna, and I'm going to start by adding a little bit of color to our rock. As you can see, I'm just smushing this stuff on. I'm not taking any great pains at all to make this perfect. Because after this dries, we're going to come back and dry brush it all and make it look really pretty. Okay, now we're going to finish the dry brushing on these rocks. And on my palette, I just have some white acrylic. And again, I'm using another brush. This one is a different brush and it's perfectly dry. And I'm going to put a little bit of white right on the tips of the bristles of the brush. And as you can see, I'm kind of wiping off most of it. And we're going to start right here with this rock. Oops, I need a little more. A little more. There we go. I'm going to start right up here, and I'm just going to start dry brushing up the high spots on the rock with a little bit of white. Now, if you make a mistake here and you think you get too much white on, then go back to your other palette, pick up some raw sienna or raw umber, go back and fix the area. I mean, this is just painting, and if you make a mistake, all you got to do is wait a few minutes for, everything to dry up, and then go back and do it again. How does that look? Does that look pretty good? Add a little bit more up on the tops of the rocks where they get more sunlight. Now, you know, you can fool people's eye if you're working under your layout lighting and you've got areas where there are deep shadows. You can take some of the raw umber and go in with your brush with a little bit of white on it and go in and intensify the shadows. It'll give your rock work more of a 3D look. All right, looks pretty good. I'm going to leave it, and we'll go over to our other area that we use Sculptamold on, and I'll show you how to dry brush that. Okay, here we are. We've got the same palette with some white on it, same brush with just a little white on the tips, and we're going to start right here and come in, and we're going to start dry brushing just the areas that are sticking up, just the tips of the rocks. As you can see, what the dry brushing does, it takes and it blends the colors. If you had a little too much raw sienna or a little too much raw umber, you come in with the white and just kind of blend them together. Another trick that I use is I'll dry brush a rock face, then I'll leave it for a while, come back a day or two later and evaluate it again. And most of the time, I'll find that I need to put on more white. And this is something you may want to try on your home railroad. So there we go. We're dry brushed up. I might want to put a little bit right here. There. And that's it, a little bit of dry brushing and you have a nice looking rock face.